Okay, Sandy, the first question's for you. So your classroom has been praised for being a positive, play-focused learning environment. What are some of the strategies and the practices that you use in the classroom to foster an environment where students respect each other and feel a sense of community?
I think one thing is that dialogue, that communication between teachers and parents, and when you're transparent about the type of program that you have, explaining the ins and outs of it, giving an example of what does a day look like, what's expected of your child, how can you support your child at home, and a positive discipline code where your classroom is emotionally responsive and you as a teacher are creating and supporting a democratic classroom where you don't have rules, you have agreements. You don't have timeouts. You have moments where you press pause and you talk about it, because biting is actually a very interesting early childhood behavior, and it means a lot of different things. I've been bitten by kids out of love. The kids get really excited and all of a sudden they clamp down. You're like, oh my gosh, hi, what's going on? You know, like, I love you. Like, I love you too. How else can you show me? You know, let's give a hug. It's not just, and when you're not there and you're sitting in class trying to achieve your goals, getting those phone calls is really, you know, it's almost like the teacher is tattletaling.
Student parent.
Right, and you do have to communicate. And I have conversations with parents where I'm like, listen, today was a difficult day. You know, Margaret bit at choice time because this happened, and this is how I intervened, and maybe you guys want to talk about it at that time. And, you know, it's not like we have a no biting call. Of course you have a no biting policy. That needs to be said. I mean, you're like, yes, biting, you know, but little kids bite because they can't articulate their thoughts and feelings, and it's a very great, it's a good way to let someone know you don't like what they're doing, and they'll, you know, and it needs to be dealt with in a safe and loving and supportive and respectful way. Respectful. So.
That is such a teacher perspective. That's great. What Zakia, when you had this experience as a pre-K parent, I mean, pre-K can be such an important kind of moment for a family and for a kid. How do you feel like a negative or a positive experience affects that child and that family's experience of elementary school and middle school and just of the educational system?
So that's a really good question. So for me, I was a new parent. Obviously, you know, he was a new student. So I was like really excited about like preschool and going through that process. You know, I was I would say I don't know what the word is, a helicopter mom. So I always wanted to be a great parent, you know, a great mom, and make sure that I give my child, you know, access to the very best. So that was like my goal. And so, you know, what this teacher just described, I would have loved for that to have been my experience. It just wasn't. Sort of, you know, the communication, the nonverbal communication said a lot to me, sort of like by the teachers and even the administrator. And one thing that I would add is that what I saw was that there was an attempt to remove him from the school, period. And the way that they went about doing that was to encourage me to have him evaluated. He was just 3 years old. And then it was articulated to me even before the evaluation that if he, you know, has a disability, you know, if he is ADHD, then your public school district where you live has to provide services for you. And so, yeah, that was my experience. And I was like, oh, wow. I definitely think my experience, coupled with that of the other parents that I began to talk to and ask them about their experiences, was definitely around a race and class lens.
A big part of my teaching philosophy is making sure that parents from all points, you know, from all demographics, from all areas, have access. You know, my class mom is an English language learner. She constructs emails, we meet, we work together hands in hand. She was a little bit nervous in the beginning, but I made her feel capable. I put the power in her hands, and it's actually really helping her to get better commands of her oral language is great, but just the written part, it's very different. Her native language is Arabic, so it's not at all like English. But just involving parents and having them come in and share their culture and share with us, bringing in supplies and materials for the children to work with instead of going to the store and buy things. We don't have any plastic doctor kits in our school. The children are making them from materials that the parents are bringing in. Parents run choice time centers. Parents are in my classroom every day for different reasons, and if they can't be there, they can be there in other very meaningful ways to be able to be a partner with their child's learning.
Zakiya, as a parent, what do you think programs can do to welcome families, and does some of the techniques Sandy had mentioned, do they resonate with you? Do you think that could make a school or a pre-K program more welcoming?
I wish Sandy was in Dayton Public Schools. I wish he had a teacher like her every single year. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality. Unfortunately, the data continues to show us, African American boys in particular continue to be at the bottom, and that's a national issue. And so, one thing that I think that is extremely important is for people to acknowledge sort of their own biases, and also acknowledge, how to basically check those biases, even not just for the child, but oftentimes the bias extends to the parent, especially in a poor community, in an urban community. I can say that, that even with me being an organizer and very active, sometimes it just still doesn't matter, because the control and compliance and the overall philosophy of a school building and of a district, there's a power dynamic that we don't talk about. And so, we pathologize parents and say, oh, well, parents are horrible, they don't want to be involved, especially Black parents. They don't care about their kids' education. All of those things are absolutely incorrect. When you look at the power dynamic, the issue is that parents from that particular demographic, especially if they're low income, definitely don't get a welcoming at the door. Sometimes there's signs that say parents stop here, or you have to make an appointment. So I think we have to be honest about whether we are actually creating a school environment that is actually welcoming and appreciating and acknowledging and even valuing the parents of a particular community. And that's just not the case.
That's a really powerful perspective of even the little things that say you're not welcome or you're not valued. We today are lucky to have Dr. Stacy Clay join us from the St. Louis Public School System. So he is joining us today to kind of give us some background on how St. Louis changed their policy around expulsion and suspension for pre-K, for the early grades, pre-K especially. So, Dr. Clay, how did this policy change in St. Louis take root? What was the process you guys went through?
St. Louis Public Schools this year initiated a ban and suspensions for students pre-kindergarten through second grade. And the idea behind that is something that had actually been brewing in St. Louis Public Schools for a few years, if not several years. The foundation for the decision was a recognition that a lot of students come to us suffering the effects of trauma, both episodic trauma and sustained trauma through repeated kind of events that they are seeing, be it violence in the home, be it community violence, be it just the general instability that comes with living in poverty. And so with that framework, we began to view the behavior, some of the more challenging behaviors of young people we saw very differently. And we began to recognize that having young people out of the school environment was not going to serve them well at all. It may provide some degree of a respite from for the principal and the teacher, but in terms of actually serving young people, it was not the best option, because we knew young people for a variety of reasons may have been going home to circumstances that were less than ideal, and in some cases even reinforcing the behaviors that landed them in suspension in the first place. And so Dr. Adams charged Student Support Services with bringing together stakeholders, and I know that's a based on what I have a ladder question, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but really the genesis was understanding trauma and its effects on young people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clay, Sandy, Zakia. We've absolutely enjoyed hearing your perspective.